Lots of clarity in this episode regarding Dr. Jen's life, past and present, her reaction to Noella, and also Noella's divorce update, which may be hurting her credibility in the whole divorce storyline. And of course, this is the eve of the first cast trip of the season. So thank you all for being here. For those of you who are new, my name is Nick Zangl, and this is episode 6 of Real Housewives of Orange County Season 16 recap and react titled Straight Questions, Straight Ish Answers. Now, before we get into everything, I wanted to say that I'm so glad to be back live with you after moving this live a few days because I was down for the count, out sick end of last week. And those of you who are usually here on the YouTube live stream, you know that we normally don't go live on Monday afternoons, but it is also a holiday for me for Martin Luther King Jr. Day for work. So I was able to catch up on some things. I went and got a haircut. And after being sick and having some family things come up after I was recovering from sickness this weekend, it was just good to kind of take a day to catch up and be with you all. And then after we're done here, I'm going to watch some football. And I hope everyone's just having a great day so far, whether you're working or not. But, anyways, let's get right into the recap and our reactions, where we start this episode with Heather and her daughter Max going to get their auras read at a local shop where Heather tries to be witty by saying she is attracted to a certain aura color on the wall. But then her daughter Max quickly corrects her mom by saying, I don't think that's how it works. But clearly Heather was trying to play dumb for fun, banter. But, anyways, we then get a flashback to Heather's previous run on the show where they actually went to a psychic, I believe, during the whole Brooks and Vicky saga cancer scam, which is interesting that this is tied into the beginning of this episode. I don't know if they did this on purpose because that whole saga will be reminded of later when we go into Dr. Jen and what's going on with her. But, anyways, Heather says she thinks these mother-daughter bonding experiences are necessary, especially as Max is going to be going away to college very, very soon. So now they're each looking at the photo of their aura that they took, and they look at the printouts with the lady at the shop, and they're joking about what their auras mean and comparing them. And we get the real reason why they are at this reading, and it is to ask the aura reader to be a thing or an event or a station, I guess, at Max's book launch party. And again, I sighed at this once this came out because I can't not notice the product placement by the Dubrows, even though virtually every cast member does it. I think it is just a lot at once from Heather because this is her first season back, but I'll get to this again later in the episode. But, anyways, Heather points out how much of a big deal this book is for Max as an out bisexual teenager going to a conservative Catholic high school. Now, me as a native Orange County person, I have a few high schools in mind that are Catholic, and obviously she says conservative, but it's more likely to be conservative in OC anyway. But I have them in mind, but I'm not going to say which ones because obviously I don't want to give anyone ideas. But a couple of them come to mind that have already been featured on the show in past seasons. So, anyways, Heather then again tries to be funny or witty by asking the the producer in her confessional, "Is conservative and Catholic redundant?" So I'll get to that in a second. But then Heather and Max are having a heart to heart to where Heather is praising her daughter for being so open, considering Heather's family didn't talk about these things, whether it's sexuality or emotions or whatnot, when she was growing up. Now, Heather then shares Max came out as bisexual during the pandemic lockdown and how the lockdown affected her daughter, who already had social anxiety. And that was what spurred Max to start her podcast and then the book. So, who knows what influence Terry or Heather had on all those things coming about, but they're here and we're seeing that she wants to use those things to help people. So Heather is now voicing over, well, as Heather was talking about all that, she was voicing this over Max going to talk to the sales associate who we saw when they walked in the door. And they're making small talk. But from what we are being shown, Max was being very forward by asking the girl working there if she is straight. And the girl says no. And we see them exchange Snapchat information, and it appears everything was very easy and open, where Heather is just looking on in awe and smiling big at her flourishing social butterfly of a daughter, and kind of just reacting to how easy this generation kind of connects and shares information. But let's talk about first with that last part of Max coming or connecting with a fellow non-straight person, if you will. From what they showed us, it seemed kind of out of nowhere how Max connected with this girl in the store over both of them not being straight. But at the end, when she was telling Heather about it, it did seem more real. And they probably didn't show us the whole scene. And maybe this was happening because Heather was trying to set up with the girl, like time and date of the party and whatnot. But I'm thinking it wasn't so random because, one, even in 2021, it's more likely to run into someone who's not straight, anyways. But I can guess that the girl working there was probably asking what they were doing there. And Max probably told her, "Oh, we're planning my book launch party." And probably then they asked about, or she asked about what the book was about. And she probably said, "Oh, I'm a out bisexual teen. I'm trying to help teens and parents." And that's probably what opened the door to her asking her if she was straight. Of course, she's mic'd up, so they can cut whatever they want out of it. But I'll get to the chat in a second. I see some of you here. So last thing about Heather stereotyping the conservative Catholic type. And I immediately thought, of course, she's trying to point this out to kind of laissez-faire joke about it. But if it was such a bad thing for conservative Catholics to have a bisexual teenager at their school, she wouldn't still be going to that school. So it did seem like a stretch of Heather trying to pander to a certain group, which seems like the religious sector of America, at least for the most part, has come around to the idea of gay and bisexual and whatnot, or at least more tolerant. So I think this may support my theory that Heather is on the show also to kind of push an agenda and kind of get in with a certain crowd. I don't think Max isn't bisexual. I don't think she's faking it, but um, I just think the fact that this came out helped Heather get back on the show and is her winning formula instead of focusing too much on the opulence and other not so popular societal things, especially after the last few years of life for a lot of us in the world, which I'm not hating on her for those things because we want to watch the lifestyles of the rich and famous who also have life challenges that kind of go beyond the class divides. But I'm just saying I don't buy everything that's being pushed on us at face value by the bros. Now let's see. I see someone in the chat. Let's see who's here. Hello, UC Boss. Long time no see, Nick. I'm proud you finally got your 1K and then some to monetize this. Good to see you, number 277. Thank you so much, UC Boss. And I see your avatar there saying rest in peace to your dad. So I hope you're doing well. And I know that's been going on for a while and for a lot of us. So I hope you're doing well and I hope you're finding some peace and hope to kind of some of my videos hopefully are distractions for any of you out there going through tough stuff because I know I've been having some um, family stuff going on too and it's not easy and we're all kind of just trying to do our best in this life as we go through it and get older. So yes, thank you so much for thumbsing up UC Boss and sharing. Appreciate that. And hopefully, I know you're not as interested in the Real Housewives stuff, but I hope I'll get some other content out there that you like as well. So, all right, thank you so much for being here, and let's keep going to Gina, who is now over at Noella's house, and they're having rosé spritzers, and Noella shares she found where James is through a credit card that she found out she actually still has access to. Now, Noella then asks Gina to guess where he is. Pick a continent, is what she says. And Noella goes on to say, it's not the United States and it's not Puerto Rico, which is funny because neither of those things are a continent. And then Gina guesses South Africa, which is still not a continent. So clearly they are geographically challenged, which is okay. But then Noella says he is in Mykonos, Greece, but he doesn't know that she knows. Then Gina in her confessional is freaking out, not only over how absurd this whole story it continues to be as it unfolds, but is also trying to figure out where Mykonos is in her brain on the map. And of course, the producers and the editors know what they're doing, and they helpfully threw a graphic on the screen showing us where Mykonos, Greece is. I know where that is, but I know maybe some others didn't. But anyways, Noella then asks to keep it hush because she doesn't want him to get word of this and then him change the password and they lose track because she actually told her attorneys about this so they can keep track of where he is as well. And then Noella says she thinks this may explain because Mykonos is a tiny island that's kind of a party island. May explain her theory that he's kind of going through a midlife crisis and why he may be doing all this and it kind of makes sense. And says that James clearly is nothing that she thought he was. And she always says, clearly he has, and she also said he clearly has no problem moving on. So she needs to stop wasting her time mourning this man leaving her because he doesn't really deserve it. And sorry, I lost my thought after I checked the chat. And so also saying that it is too soon to date after Gina asked her if she's dating, but she said she did that morning enjoy some self pleasure, and Gina ends the scene by saying, "Oh, good, at least the plumbing's working." So let's react to this part, and then I'll check the chat again. But what was weird about these latest developments by Noella sharing us with us on the show is that she's telling us she now has access to a credit card that she didn't know she had access to, which kind of contradicts what she shared previously of being completely cut off from any finances from her ex. Now, clearly, it wasn't a card she used a lot or would even be near, it would be near the top of the list of things to check, uh, unless he didn't charge to it very often, or it was a card he forgot to turn on or turn off because he didn't think to do it, because maybe he didn't think she knew about that card or had access to it. I don't know, but it's one of those things that kind of makes you go, it's everything kind of weird. And as far as the Mykonos angle to the story being a destination James went to, either he is just going through that party phase, midlife crisis, trying to escape his whole life and escape the country, literally, or there is some connection with Greece and well known people flocking there to escape problems elsewhere. Two people I immediately thought of that would have done this in recent years is Tom Hanks and his wife, who have dual citizenship there now for some reason, and Lindsay Lohan off the top of my head. But anyways, let's see what everyone thinking in the chat. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that, UC Boss. I can imagine that's tough to lose people around that time. Hopefully I can give you some um, connection, some place to kind of take your mind off. So anyways, thank you for being open to share that, and I hope everything, hopefully some healing. I know it's never, you can't ever replace anybody that you lose, but hopefully you get to make them proud and carry on the legacy for them. So, all right, let's keep going then to the next scene. So we are now with Heather, Jen, and Emily doing a sauna treatment where Jen is sharing her experience as the breadwinner of her family, where she says that after their uh, spa treatment, she's going to go back to work to see clients because she can't just step away all day from that, which is followed by her explaining how a few days after marrying Ryan, her husband, her ex-boyfriend sued her. And we get on the screen flashes of the news article headline saying SunCal billionaire suing cheating ex-girlfriend for $850,000, which apparently was the ex saying all the gifts he gave her when they were together were actually short-term loans. And we will get to that article in a second because I found it, and it's very interesting to see what came out of there. But Heather then says whatever to that story of the man doing that, kind of like dismissing the man as kind of like, whatever, dude. And in her confessional, Jen then expands on that story by saying she started dating that man shortly after her father passed away because he was this interesting and golfy man, kind of implying that she was kind of in a bad state and was not very stable to be in a relationship at the time. But this will come up again later as well. But she said she then broke up with him after learning he was separated from his ex, not divorced, as he led her to believe. And then Jen says a year ago, the choice to have her be the breadwinner early in their marriage was a strain on them, but they're doing better now. But Emily then shares in her confessional similar struggles we've seen on the show between her and Shane, and starts jokingly saying, "You can't be a single woman in your 40s with kids in Orange County. You'd have to move." Followed by Emily pulling out a Jersey Mike's turkey sub sandwich. By the way, I love Jersey Mike's, from her purse, eating it in the sauna, and they're all joking with her about it. But Emily says, "You know what? I'm just going to sweat it right out. So it's all good." So let's get into actually that article with Jen. It was actually from the New York Post. And I found the New York Post article, which was flashed on the screen during the episode, that claims her billionaire real estate developer ex sued her for the money he gave her as gifts, according to Jen. But the ex said in the suit, according to that article, She actually asked him for money for tuition at the University of Hawaii, monthly expenses, cancer treatment, and to freeze her eggs, which the ex claims some of these reasons to request money by Jen were fake, including the cancer treatments. Now, anyone else's Brooks, Vicky, or alarm bells, cancer scam going off in your head? I know I immediately thought that, and I'm surprised they didn't flash any of that on the screen. But again, they didn't go into the details of the lawsuit at this moment. Maybe later in the season it'll come up. But the ex also had claimed that she was cheating on him, but she also says the same about him. So, as far as Jen saying they broke up because he was just separated, not divorced, maybe that gives more context to why Jen is having such a reaction to Noella's marriage situation, because maybe she's jealous that Noella actually found a separated man that was well off and was able to get to the point where they actually got married, and now she's divorced, of course, and going through the whole thing. Maybe Jen is upset that she didn't actually get to that point. I don't know, but we will see. All right. Thanks for being here, UC Boss. Hopefully, you see you around soon in the comments and in other places. So hopefully, you're doing well. All right. So let's keep going. So we now have a quick look at Noella doing yoga in her backyard, and then her losing her balance, where then Shannon is with her daughters, packing for their Nashville trip, and back to Emily, Heather, and Jen now at their nail appointments, where Heather goes right into saying her and Terry have land in Idaho, but it is not ready to be built on. So they are opting to build or buy in Cabo San Lucas, Mexico, followed by Heather inviting them to a girls' trip in Cabo with a flashback to the racetrack last episode with Gina from last, where we didn't see that Heather actually invited her as well. So then Jen shares her text with Noella asking her out to drinks to work out their issues, where Heather then shares her problems with Noella from calling her a fake bitch, shared by Noella's friend Nicole, and sharing now that Heather is fulfilling that phony bitch rule if she doesn't say anything to Noella. And this all came up as they were wondering if Noella was going to be invited to the trip. Now, then Jen shares again, although she doesn't think Noella's actions are right, she understands she is going through a hard time and lashing out and bullying, according to Jen, women as a result. Now, before we move on, I want to say quickly, here's another instance of Terry and Heather plugging a product or a project. And again, I'm not hating on them for that. It just seems there isn't anything so far that they've shown on the show from the Dubrows that isn't a business or something that they're plugging or whatnot or showing off, which one can say is actually a smart move on their behalf. But of course, that is what's really going on in their lives. But it just is coming off unnatural to me on the show at the moment. So now, Shannon and daughters are now in Nashville with her mom after 4 years of their last visit. We learn her mom is really happy in Nashville. Shannon says she wishes she had visited her mom more, but her mom says she understands why she hasn't because Shannon was going through a hard time. And Shannon says she feels bad for repeating the pattern of bad marriage to her kids the way her parents did, prompting Sophie to say she sees herself marrying her boyfriend Reese, who we met at the last episode, where Shannon rightfully is nervous about that, stating she didn't marry until 36, but Sophie is only 20. But Shannon's mom adds and kind of backs up Sophie, saying, well, I got married at 21. And then Stella calls out her mom, saying, well, you almost got married in college. But Shannon then says she's glad she didn't because they were too young. And if she would have met that person at 30, they probably would have been married. But anyway, Sophie then says Reese is her healthiest relationship she's had and never got to experience growing up, to which Shannon, of course, is sad hearing that and is tearing up, saying that she feels bad. Sophie is saying that she almost doesn't feel worthy of having this great relationship with Reese. And they end the scene with hugs and kisses, and Adeline, the other twin, saying a quick, I'm good, to being asked how she is. And Shannon again says, this is my child of very few words, and it's clear that she is like that, and she's clearly doesn't want to be that much on the show compared to her twin sister. So now to Heather's meeting with Noella at Heather's house, and Noella arriving in the middle of Terry and Heather doing an infomercial for their beauty supplement line, where Noella is kind of on the same wavelength as me in calling out the Dubrows, trying to make their product placement look natural when it is clear that is the main reason they came back on the show. And Noella then says she is not there to go toe to toe or fall for Heather trying to impress her, but if Heather brings it, she will end it. And she said all that in her confessional, but it's clear she meant it. So then they continue in Heather's other room with, I guess, mood slash vision boards of Terry and Heather's businesses, where again, Noella points out how this looks like a textbook narcissist behavior, and she would be impressed if she was not creeped out, followed by Heather asking how she is doing. Noella says she'd be lying if she said she is doing well, but Heather then goes right into addressing the comments she heard Noella said about her from Nicole. Noella owns saying it and admits it was misdirected anger that should have been directed at her ex, James. And they move past that, but then quickly address what Gina shared with Heather at the racetrack about Noella telling them not to trust Heather. And mind you, this is very reminiscent of what Shannon told Heather about Gina and Emily. So it sounds like a carousel of mistrust at this point. And Noella then clarifies that her mistrust comments stem from the change in her friend Nicole after Nicole spoke with Heather after the dinner party we saw in the last few episodes where the Terry lawsuit was brought up. Heather then goes on the defense saying, I'm not sure why that affects your relationship with me. And then we get a flashback to the awkward lunch between Noella and Nicole from a few weeks ago, where it appears Noella was trying to squash any, or Nicole was trying to squash any talks of that lawsuit at that lunch, because apparently Terry and Heather off camera had told Nicole to just not bring it up ever again. Then Heather is wondering why they would want to start their friendship like this, to which Noella claps back saying, well, the start of our friendship was me being in your house at a party where you were yelling at and slamming people against walls. Heather seems to be confused at that comment, even though Noella is not backing down from talking about it. And in her confessional, Noella clarifies she was told Terry and Heather were shoving someone against a wall at the Nobu dinner party. And then Heather channels her inner Tamara Judge defensive smirk with, oh, what are you talking about, face, trying to dismiss this claim as crazy, but clearly there is some there because of Heather's defensiveness, in my opinion. And we will have to see how this all plays out if more information comes out or more specifics or more footage, because I think more will come out about this if Noella's Watch What Happens Live appearance last week was any indication, where Andy Cohen vaguely refers to something that will come out soon on the show, giving more context to this. But Noella and Heather then agree that they can remain acquaintances for now, and Heather doesn't want to give this any more life. All right. So from this scene, we get further confirmation that the awkward lunch between Noella and Nicole had a lot more to it than we initially saw. And if it weren't for Noella bringing up the Terry versus Nicole lawsuit in this scene, or Nicole recounting the lunch events to Heather going to the last party we saw last week, we probably wouldn't have seen any more from that or heard about it. But it looks like Terry and Heather don't want that lawsuit talk to continue, which I don't blame them. However, it appears off camera, according to Noella, their reaction to that being brought up was worse than what we saw on camera, and Noella bringing it up, someone being pushed, or bringing up someone being pushed at the Nobu party, may support something I actually heard around the blogs about Terry or Heather pushing a cameraman or a producer, someone in the crew, other than what we saw on the show with Heather kind of putting her hand in front of the camera. So if that is true, it may be why Heather is having this very strong reaction to Noella and kind of telling her, maybe we don't need to be friends. Maybe we don't need to push the boundaries or push the limits, because this could be kind of the unraveling of the Dubrows, if this story comes out, if it's true, who are known to want to carefully craft their public image. Now, the problem is this is supposed to be a reality show. So if the reality is not being shown and one of your castmates wants to air it out and keep bringing it up, it is fair game. And it makes me wonder if the Dubrows are now regretting coming back on the show. Now, one last thing is also Noella is smart to see what happened to her friend Nicole and put up some walls and some boundaries with Heather until she knows for sure otherwise. And I also respect Noella for saying she isn't going to kiss Heather's ass now, even though in the beginning one could argue she was, but also I think we could chalk it up to them being mutually nice to each other by default because they are just meeting. But anyways, let's keep going. There was a lot to unpack there. Let me see if everyone's good. Okay, looks like everyone's good in the chat. But if you have any other things, if you're here live in the chat, make sure to leave them there, any of your thoughts. And let's keep going to everyone now arriving and on their way to Max's book launch party, where the Dubrows arrive first to greet the guests as they arrive, including Noella, who is the first to arrive of the cast, who is keeping it surface level. And Heather then embraces her inner Meredith Marks from the Salt Lake City franchise by saying she is not engaging with Noella, and they're kind of just keeping it cool. But Terry is then trying to understand Shane's Mormon life by saying, wait, you don't drink? You don't smoke marijuana? You don't do anything? And it seems like he was joking, but also trying to find an in to corrupt Shane. But Shane obviously is a very devout Mormon and not going to budge. But it's just fun, I guess, for them to poke him. Then Nicole arrives with a Zach Morris brick bedazzled phone, and she noticeably avoids her quote-unquote friend, Noella. And we then learn that Nicole hung up the phone on Noella when they tried to arrange a meeting recently. And it appears what we saw at that awkward lunch was the beginning of the end of their deep friendship, or at least prevented them from going deeper or to the next level of their friendship. Now, Dr. Jen then arrives, and everyone is happy her and Noella are getting along. We see Noella apologized recently when they met for lunch about projecting onto Jen, similar to how she did with Heather, which shows that she is capable of taking accountability. And we learn that Jen's husband's real name is actually Ryan, but changed it to Ryan, R-Y-N-E, like orange Ryan, to be, this is what she says, orange Ryan. I thought Ryan was Rind, but whatever. To be different, I guess. And they all start poking fun at that, which I was confused too when we first met him and his wife on the show. I thought his name was Ryan because it sounded so much like Ryan, but apparently it's Ryan. But it all makes sense now. But Jen then introduces Ryan to everyone else. And I also agree with the ladies that why would you want to make your name more complicated and harder to spell? I usually think people do the opposite. They usually have a complicated name to spell and say, and they go the opposite, trying to make it easier. But anyways, we are now with Noella, who is trying or sharing with Emily and Gina how Shannon is sick after coming back from Nashville, so she will not be attending the party. Noella and Gina are still geographically challenged, trying to figure out Nashville, Tennessee, put the two together. But Emily is then jokingly asking, "Oh, are you missing your friend Shannon?" Where Noella says, "Oh, Shannon's my girl, and she's honest and forthright, and blah blah blah." And Emily and Gina go, I don't know about that. I don't know if we really know Shannon. Where Emily says she is going to take every chance she gets to take a jab at Shannon because she thinks Shannon deserves it. So Heather is now with Jen talking about their excitement for going to Cabo on the girls' trip, followed by Shane and Travis wondering where their ladies are, and Emily getting her aura read, wondering why her vaginal area is red in the aura reading. Her, Gina, and Noella then are having fun reading their auras, and everyone is also having fun at the photo booth and talking with Max, the author. And we then have Emily and Shane. Sorry. Yes. Then Emily and Shane sharing their history of how they got together with Noella. And somehow riding horses came up after Noella said something about her hair being half a horse. And Emily asks Noella if she'll ride horses with her in Cabo. But quickly, Noella says, I'm not really invited to Cabo yet. But Emily then says Emily's told by Noella she's just happy to be at the party with Heather after their rough start and to be in this place with her at Heather's after their meeting at Heather's house. So Heather and Terry are now giving a thank you speech to everyone for coming, sharing how proud they are of Max. And Max then thanks everyone as well, where they are now getting a little bit emotional, everyone, as they are hearing this toast. And Max then just says she hopes the book helps others, both teens and their parents. And I think that's really nice. So the party continues with drunk Emily front and center, and she is being obnoxious, in my opinion. And she's sharing that she says she has cute panties on for Shane, and Noella then shares her theory that Emily and Shane might actually have the hottest sex of anyone. They are joking about how Emily falls asleep every night before any action happens, and Noella then defends Shane as a little guy, even though she's kind of poking fun at him at the same time. But then drunk Emily is then joking with Nicole's Zach Morris phone about the cost of it, but only being able to hold lip gloss. Then turns to slurring her words about student loans somehow and having to pay $1,000 a month till she dies because they're at 3% interest. But then Emily says to Jen, "No one paid for me to go to school." Where Jen then says she went on a scholarship. But Emily seems confused because she thought Jen was from a wealthy family. Then the ex-boyfriend story we learned about earlier in the episode in the sauna is brought up again by Emily, where Emily asks Jen if her ex-boyfriend, was the one who paid for her college, where Jen then clarifies she paid back anything to him because she wanted him to go away. Clearly, Emily, we'll get to this in a second, read the article we just read, and Jen was kind of playing it off. But anyways, Emily is then questioning why Jen was with her ex after Jen says he wasn't even good looking, where Emily is trying to coerce Jen obnoxiously into saying she was with him for the money, as Gina, being a good friend, is pushing Emily to go home because of the past drunk Emily behavior of turning into a quote unquote Hulk, as Gina describes it. I can't remember if Emily likes that term or not, or if she's going to watch this and not be too happy about that. But as Emily is leaving the party, she addressed Heather about Noella not coming to the girls' trip. Heather was kind of like, "Why are you mentioning this? She's not invited." And Emily then talking to Shane about going home and getting it on, and then Emily having a drunken conversation trying to go to the bathroom with Shane. But the episode then ends with a preview of the Cabo trip, where it appears Noella is going to show up somehow, but we're going to have to see how that unfolds next week. Let's get into my final reactions to this final scene, and then I'll get to your chats. So let me know what you think. So the whole last part about the student loans thing was interesting because I think it was an alcohol telling the truth serum moment for Emily, where she wanted to know about Jen's lawsuit more, which we touched on earlier, where it appears Jen wants to be vague and move on from it, which I think also is why the student loan thing seemed random, because Jen didn't really talk about that part. But if you didn't know what the article or lawsuit was talking about, which we talked about this episode and give more context to it, it would appear random. But it looks like this was also Emily kind of projecting or exposing some of her own problems with student debt potentially, and then projecting it onto Jen, who says she had scholarships to college and was from a wealthy family and whatnot. But the ex, of course, alleges he paid for it. But anyways, even if Jen was from a wealthy family, it doesn't mean she can't or shouldn't take out loans or get scholarships, because even for wealthy people, I know, because they want their kids to have responsibility of paying it back or not get a free ride for a life that they had been very blessed with, and with a lot of wealth growing up, the kids, because of the parents being well, that they actually prefer them to take loans and pay them back themselves and whatnot. So you can say if that is right or not in the comments, or to build their credit or whatnot. You can debate the credit debate in the comments if you want to. But anyways, that was my take on that last scene. But let me know what you think of this final scene before you go, and I'm going to touch on a few things from Watch What Happens Live this past week, the last two episodes, Sunday and from Salt Lake City, and Wednesday from Orange County, because they're related. Make sure you do whatever you got to do wherever you are tuning in from to either like or share or upvote or whatever the term is on whatever platform you're watching, to let me know that you liked this episode. And make sure you do whatever you got to do to make sure you don't miss another one by subscribing or following or saving, whatever you need to do, bookmark, whatever the term is on whatever platform. And those quick updates on the Watch What Happens Live is So on Wednesday, Emily was on Watch What Happens Live with Andy Cohen, and he asked her about what she thought of Salt Lake City, kind of them leaving the religion, kind of panning it and calling it a cult and whatnot. And Emily's husband, Shane, who is a Mormon, was the bartender, and he basically just said no comment, kind of let's leave them in their corner, we'll stay in ours. And Emily kind of just vaguely said it's interesting to see two different perspectives. So clearly they don't want to cause any drama. And maybe it does give some credence to what Heather on Salt Lake City is saying about how once you leave the church, you're kind of looked down upon, or if you're not following the the behavior that they want you to follow, then you kind of are dismissed and kind of pushed to the side a little bit. So that might be true. Obviously, they may don't really know each other, but Heather was on from Salt Lake City was on Sunday. Watch What Happens Live after their episode, and Andy asked her what she thought as well, and she basically just said a similar thing of like people reach out to her all the time, and kind of just pointed out how it is a very behavior centered religion, and she didn't really say one way or the other if she was disappointing Emily for letting her daughter go into Mormonism or not, but she was just pointing out some facts of the behavior is very hard to keep up, and if you don't follow it, you're looked down upon and whatnot. So she was kind of, I think, alluding to kind of like a warning, like be careful what you expose your kid to and whatnot. So it looked like they were both very respectful to each other. But I touched on this uh, a few episodes ago, and I have a YouTube short on YouTube and on Rumble. I posted that video as well of that segment in that episode where I touched on how I thought it was interesting, like comparing and contrasting Salt Lake City's recounts of the Mormon religion to Orange County, kind of my experience in that. So if you want to go back to that episode and hear my thoughts on that, make sure to do that. But lots of very interesting things came out of this episode. So I'm curious to see how this unravels, not only on next week's cast trip or the next couple of weeks' cast trip to Cabo, but also the rest of the season and the fallout from all that. So if you're still here and you have any last minute things to put in the live chat, make sure to do so. And if not, wherever you tuned in from, whether you were here live or on a replay, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to listen/watch. And I will talk to you in the next one. Bye bye.